Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo.
When Steve Jobs made his comeback to Apple in 1997, the company was a mess, and he had to end the downward slope and give it a new life. Here's the crazy one. This iconic ad campaign was the signifier of the comeback of the Rockstar company, but more importantly, the reclamation of the spirit within the company that has once changed the world. What Steve Jobs must have not known, however, is that this campaign would create the biggest mantra for all entrepreneurs. Think different is indeed what you need to create something new, or even perceive something new. Therefore, it is only rightful that it has become the entrepreneur's mantra. The thing is, being something in itself is almost never good or bad. For example, being diverse per se isn't good or bad. And on the same horizon, being or thinking different in itself is not good or bad. In fact, it's probably more wrong than right. For example, a Korean burger franchise called Lotteria launched kimchi burger a while back, and I accidentally tried it, and guess what? It sucked. So is it really a mantra, or is it in fact a dogma? In my, literally previous life, I was a strategist, and in the world of strategists, we say any tool is only capable as a researcher. And what that means is, it's not really about whether it's a dogma or mantra, but it's actually about how you apply it. So how do successful people apply it? How did I apply it in my recovery process to get to the top 1% of the top 1% result? Let me actually show you something. So I asked Sherry to draw this because my hands are not so fully functional. By the way, Cherry is the name that my baby angel gave Chi-Chi to. Let me take you back to your favorite algebra Facebook answer. This is a normal distribution graph. I'm not going to go too deep into the details, but I do want you to grab the key concepts type because this simple graph actually conceptualizes and explains most things in life. In the middle of the graph is the mean, or mu in Greek, which means the average. The Greek letter to the left and right from the mean is called sigma, and it means standard deviation, which represents how the data are spread around the mean. So, for an oversimplified example, if the average return of the seed stage VC fund is 300%, the standard deviation is 50%. It means the return multiples of most of such funds will fall within the 250% to 350% bracket. And it's because most of the data, 68.3% to be precise, will fall between -1 sigma and 1 sigma. An easy example of this is how most students' 100-meter sprint records are grouped around the average record. Now, if you trained, you'll be relatively easily able to step up your game to the next bracket of up to, say, 2 sigmas, or even to the next bracket of 3 sigmas, where 95.4% and 99.7% of all the students will fall into. This is where you can get into by doing better. But what if you want to compete at the state, or even at the national level, or even at the global level? You will need some serious talents, or you need to put a really disproportionate amount of time to your training, or to be honest, both. That means a few sigmas above the average can only be achieved by being different and doing something different. And this is the only place where you have to be different and think different. The real powerful thing is that once you understand this concept, you can literally take anything to advantage. If your aspiration is not merely to be good or great, but to be very top. Let me give you my firm, 541 Ventures, as an example. When I started 541, and even to this day, my aspiration was never just to build the great VC firm. My aspiration was, and still is, to build an iconic VC firm that lasts generations. Now, given how many VC firms are out there, and given how only a small portion of such firm last generation with iconic brand. It's only possible when we deliver the top 1% of top 1% performance. And get this, it gets even better. When I went out and met investors called limited partners, or LPs in this world, one of them literally said, hey, we literally check all the boxes for no's. Well, it turns out that there are archetypes of VCs that LPs like to back, and I was none of them. I'm not a spin-off from established firms like Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz. I'm not a co-founder or a single-digit number employee at a famous tech startup, or even I'm not a San Francisco cool kid that knows so-and-so. But it turns out that all of these difficulties and disadvantages are the best asset that we have, because it really forced us to be different. I literally had to design every block of elements different. From how we first find entrepreneurs, to how we assess them, to how we allocate and deploy our capital. Literally everything. And because of this, we could find our place in the ecosystem just in 2 weeks. And there was a huge win for somebody who is just fresh and new in the ecosystem. And it applies just the same to the fight that I'm fighting right now. The most difficult thing in this fight is not about the physical challenges itself. It's actually about the opaqueness in the process. Because nobody, including the doctors and therapists, could tell you how much and how further you can improve and how fast you get there. Every day you just get up and fight the fights, not knowing where you are and where you're going. And that's really difficult. And by the definition of normal distribution, you will end up getting the average result if you follow this path. So I've turned the process on its head. On top of doing the best I could every day, I laid really ambitious goals for longer time horizons to my trainers and therapists, and worked backwards from there with them to come up with daily and weekly objectives. For example, when I could barely move my legs, my 4-month goal was to walk 10 steps. And to make it happen, my trainers and therapists would set up the rehab program for me and push me through the hell every day. And this was particularly important in my recovery process, because by having the goals and objectives, now I knew exactly where I was and what worked and what didn't. It means the process was no longer opaque. And by focusing on what's worked and doing more of them, I could push it even much further. So now we understand that getting to top 1% of top 1% or top 0.01% is only achievable when you're thinking different and willing to do something different. But what does that really mean? First, you just don't want to be different, but you actually have a certain framework of thinking. For instance, one of the biggest privilege what I do for a living allows is to take a peek into how some of the world's smartest people think and operate. And time again, I see the entrepreneurs that change the world have this common pattern of thinking. One, they almost always start from where the current frontier lies and what the status quo is, along with what it must look like in the future. Then two, they drill down on what holds the current status quo there. And finally, they figure out what different stuff they have to do to break it and bring about the future. Because the gap between that future and the status quo is their opportunity. And what that means is their difference is in fact very intentionally and cautiously crafted. And second, thinking or being different is not an anonym of bring it. I know this might sound very obvious, but you'd be surprised if I tell you how often we get to hear about lazy different from, smart founders because their weekend is sacred or they need work-life balance. Different or not, you just have to bring it 24/7, and that's a table stake. Third, and this is super important, you just need to find and surround yourself with the right people, because all the stuff that we talked about is just super cool, right? But in reality, when you tell people that that's your mountaintop, most people won't get it, or they won't even bother to try to get it because they're so fixated with their reality in low signals. And even worse, they will sometimes try to pull you down to their dimension, calling you too wild, aggressive, or crazy because no one could do it. Don't settle there if this happens to you. Just because no one could do it doesn't mean that it's impossible. In fact, that just might be the confirmation that you're actually on something that's really pushing the boundaries. So if you have the conviction, just dismiss them and find the right path to lead. Okay, this is it for the first episode. I know this is a lot, but I promise this will change how you see the world and act upon if you could internalize it. Because this is what we do every day and how we win every day. So try it and give me a sub if you like us, probably fighting your fights, and I'll tell you all I know and all I've learned about how to win. Together, we're gonna be unstoppable.
Thinking about you, always on my mind, always on my mind.